Hello, friends. How are you? I feel like I haven't talked to you in months, but I think it's only been 3 weeks. I don't know. I didn't check the calendar, but it was before conference and so much has happened. It has been a wild go. I just realized I need to check my audio. Yes, we're rolling. Um, so much has happened in the Doctrine and Covenants. And I was preparing to discuss sections 115 through 120 with you today and realized that because we haven't talked in 3 weeks, almost 2 years of time have passed between these sections. So I have been deep in the rabbit hole of history that is surrounding these set of chapters. And I'm going to share with you a bit of it today because it is fascinating and it is so important to understand sections 115 through 120 that we're going to be talking about. But I want to show you a visual that's going to help a lot. I want to, here, I'm going to pull it up here, but first I wanted to backtrack because the last time we talked, the saints were building the Kirtland Temple and then they dedicated the Kirtland Temple in April of 1837. And so we were talking back in 1836 when they were building the temple. They finished it in 1837. We had the amazing dedication with angels and Jesus Christ himself and the prophets of old are all visiting the temple. These amazing spiritual experiences were happening in Kirtland. And then in a year's time, everything falls apart. So I this week read section 115 through 120 without any historical context. And they're beautiful. They're amazing chapters. And I read them, they're short. So I think I read them on Monday. And then I said, okay, you need to figure out the history of what's going on here. And this is where things start to fall apart. And I'm going to talk about falling apart today because I think that what happened in 1838 is happening right now. I think that we are the mirror for this particular set of time. And learning about this is really important for building our faith in modern day, but also for understanding the Lord and his voice and what he's telling us in 2021. But he told it to the saints of 1838 as well. So let's pull up a visual. This is so good. So this is on the website, churchofjesuschrist.org. And it is called, let me scroll to the top so you can see. It's called The Timeline, the Church in Ohio and Missouri, 1830 through 1839. I just Googled LDS Church Timeline, 1830 to 1839. This came up. But we're going to be talking. Oh, and there's the Kirtland Temple right there. She's so beautiful. Okay, let's pick up where we were in 1836 because we were talking about how the saints were being driven out of Missouri. Keep that in mind as I scroll. So last we talked, we had done Zion's camp. The men had marched down thinking they were going to reclaim the land of Missouri. It didn't happen. The saints ended up being driven out of Missouri. They were driven out of Independence and up to Clay County, which I think it was around 20 miles north of there. So we'll pick up right here on this timeline in 1836. So the temple's being built. The temple's dedicated in 1836. I'm sorry, I quoted you the wrong year. Okay, so in 1836, the Kirtland Temple's dedicated. It's a 4-day dedication where the heavens are opened, the veil is so thin. Amazing stories from that. I loved reading the stories and hearing them in the Saints book and in just different accounts that you can find online. So the Kirtland Temple is dedicated, and the people in Kirtland are united for a moment. They have a house to worship in. They've all sacrificed their time and their money and their talents to build this temple. And in some of the accounts I was reading, they said that for a brief moment, it was like Zion. Everyone got along. And then things start to fall apart. So meanwhile, in Missouri, we have the church leaders who are trying to find a place for the saints to go. So they've been driven out of Independence. They've been driven up to Clay County, but they don't own that land. So at the same time that we're dedicating the Kirtland Temple in Ohio, the saints in Missouri are displaced and don't know where they're going to go next. Now, over here, we have, this is what I was saying before, Jesus Christ, Moses, Elias, and Elijah. They all appear in the temple. They commit the priesthood keys to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery. They have received the fullness of what the Lord wants them to have at that time. So this is a really exciting bullet point right here in the history of the church, because they had the power that the Lord had been promising them in all the previous chapters. Now they have it. Great. Things should get really good, right? No, things aren't going to get good. So Emma gives birth to a son. That happens in June of that year. And then in late June of that year, the Clay County residents want the church to leave. So the members that have now settled in Clay County, they say, you've got to go. And so the church purchases some property in far west Missouri. Keep in mind, the church is very money poor. They have tons of land that they have bought in Missouri and Kirtland. Any money they did have went toward building the temple for the Ohio saints. The saints in Missouri just don't have money. They've been buying land, and then they got kicked out of their land. So the church as a whole does not have money. So in November of 1836, this piece of history is so important to know. And I had maybe heard of this in past seminary and institute classes, but I didn't really understand this until this week. In November of 1836, Joseph Smith organized the Kirtland Safety Society. So the idea here, and I am not a financial advisor, I'm probably going to explain this totally wrong, but the idea here is that nobody has money. They are a cash poor church, but they have a lot of property and they have buildings. They have the temple. So the Kirtland Safety Society was a bank of sorts that people would invest all of their money in. And then Joseph Smith printed his own dollars for the exchange of money. So you would give their money to them, and then they would give you their form of dollars that you could exchange among each other to replace money. So it's working off of the intent that banks kind of work this way in modern day. We give them our money and we work on debit cards, but very similar idea. But this was a society of church members exclusively. And they had about 50 members originally that I was reading who gave everything they had. Joseph Smith himself put thousands of dollars into this. So the money starts circulating, they print it, it's working. They're exchanging the dollars amongst themselves. Things are fine. Well, then there starts to be some dissents within the church in Ohio. And let's take a break on this timeline though. So the Kirtland Safety Society is going. Meanwhile, in Missouri, and I'm going to quote this wrong. I'm trying to remember down here. It's let me read it to you. I think it was the governor. Anyway, the powers that be in Missouri, they decide that Caldwell County is going to be designated for the Mormons. So they choose a specific county that the Mormons are going to go to. We're going to leave you alone. You're going to leave us alone. That's your land. So that was kind of the resolution. So in this particular bullet point of time between November and December, the saints in Ohio found a solution for their money. The saints in Missouri found a solution for their land. So this is like Merry Christmas. Everything's okay for a second, but not really. So now we're going into May of the following year, and a nationwide bank panic hits the state of Ohio. National level. This is not a Joseph Smith problem. This is a national level. So what happened in this, if you want to hear about this, read the Saints book, but don't read the Saints book if you don't have a box of tissues. And if you are faltering in a testimony of Joseph Smith, don't go digging into this. And I'm going to tell you why. Joseph Smith was a human, and I sustain Joseph Smith as a prophet. I know that he was called of God to restore this church, to translate the Book of Mormon, to reorganize a church that existed when Jesus Christ was on the earth. Joseph Smith himself, as the man, made quite a few errors. And in this specific block of time right here, there's a lot of misstep. And Joseph Smith's apostles began to doubt the man. And one particular named Warren Parrish just really doubted the man, Joseph Smith, and he created a lot of trouble. He was creating issues. He was really mad about the Safety Society, the bank, failing. So people's money that they'd put into it, they weren't able to get it back. And there was a local man who went up buying up all of those paper money that the church had print. He bought them all up, and then he went to the Safety Society and he said, I want to cash these out for dollars right now. And they said, that's not how this works. You can't get dollars back for these notes. That's not how it works. And the man got upset, and there was legal action threatened. And through a series of events, they had to give the man the money. And the Saints book talks about how Joseph Smith himself lost thousands of dollars because of this. And that was kind of the downfall of the bank. If you've seen It's a Wonderful Life, it's pretty much the plot of It's a Wonderful Life, in the sense that the bank didn't have the funds, but they had to give the funds. And now the Safety Society, which was not a bank, but crumbled. So in the exchange of the dollar bills, the apostles got upset. The people in the community got upset. As you can see here, it was a nationwide thing going on. So everyone was hurting. And Joseph Smith got heavily criticized for this. At the same time, they receive revelation that Heber C. Kimball and that some others should go on a mission to England. So they're sending elders across the aisles, but then we've got issues in Ohio. We've got problems in Missouri. So here in the end of 1837, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon, they go down to Missouri. There's a lot of tension down there. Remember, they are trying to settle new land. The first presidency is having tension. There are some members of some apostles in Far West who are upset with Joseph. So they have a meeting at the end of 1837, and they re-sustain, as right here, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon preside at the conference at Far West. David Whitmer and his counselors are sustained again as the presidency for all of Missouri. Tensions persist between Missouri leaders and the first presidency. So there's tension between, and this is just going to be the truth as we know, between the Missourians and the Mormons, as they were called. So Joseph Smith goes down and does that in Far West. Now the Safety Society closes. It barely survived a year. And now Kirtland is excommunicating people left and right. So in Kirtland, they have a meeting. I'm not sure. I should have looked in the Saints book, but within this timeline, when Joseph Smith was being heavily criticized, Warren Parrish, as I said, he was one of the loudest critics. And at one point, Joseph Smith got really sick and he couldn't get out of bed. And he was in bed for days. I think it even said weeks. And he wasn't able to attend the temple where they were holding church services. So Joseph was home on his sick bed, and many were afraid he was going to die. So they had the church meeting, and his chair as the prophet and president of the church was left open. And Warren Parrish just strolled into the temple and walked right up to the pulpit and sat in Joseph's chair. And so Joseph's brother was having none of it. He got up and told him, no, you can't sit there. You don't belong here. And that is where everything broke out. All the feelings that had been pent up, they all came out. So a man pulled out a sword. I could not believe this. Read this in the Saints book. It's just crazy. So a man pulls out a sword. Another man pulls out a revolver, and they've got, I think they said, a shotgun. So we've got all these weapons that are suddenly coming out, and the men are wrestling, and then the constables are called, and then the legal authorities are coming into the temple. This is so crazy to me. They're coming into the temple because of this one man who has incited this revolution. I mean, he's upset. So Warren Parrish was not backing down. He was having none of it. And of course, in all of that, who gets blamed? But the church leaders get blamed, not the people who are dissenting. So in December of that year, they have a meeting, and 28 people are excommunicated, including Martin Harris, which breaks my heart. Because you remember, Martin kicked off this year with our Doctrine and Covenants study as one of the most stalwart believers. Well, I should clarify that. He had a lot of doubt, but he was a stalwart supporter. And I'm so sad this happened to him. I didn't dig deeply into everyone's stories, but with me painting this picture, I hope you can see and probably empathize with the stress of what's going on. So in January of 1838, Joseph Smith and Sydney, they've got to leave Kirtland. It's not safe. So they take their families and they move down to far west Missouri. And this is where we pick up these chapters. Actually, we pick up in April. So let's catch up with that. So Thomas B. Marsh becomes the president. This is talking about how they just reorganized. And then in March, Joseph arrives in far west Missouri. And this is so sad. So when he gets there, several church leaders, including Oliver Cowdery and David Whitner, are excommunicated. So if you remember, they are two of the original, they bore testimony of the Book of Mormon. And these men have been by his side the whole time. It makes me so sad. I'm so sad that this was happening, that the emotions and the personal turmoil was happening during this time. So yeah, they get excommunicated. And now we are in April of 1838. So I just painted for you. I hope that timeline was helpful, by the way, but I just painted for you the drama of the 2 years that was behind this set of scriptures, this set of verse chapters. I think the thing that's so haunting to me, there's two things. Number one, if I took out the bullet points with the years of what I just shared with you, I could have easily put 2020. I could have put 2019 and 2020 and 2021 on all of those bullet points. We have currently been going through almost identical struggles. People have lost jobs. People have lost land. People have lost property. People have put money into banks that have crumbled. We are in an identical scenario in terms of nationwide recession, nationwide being rejected, driven out of places, divided. We're walking the same timeline. And we have a living prophet who has been getting a lot of criticism from a lot of people. The difference here is that we have more numbers now and we are a worldwide church. But that's the first thing that haunts me. The second thing that haunts me is Joseph Smith, the man, in this section of scriptures. It was not included, by the way, but during the same time, Joseph Smith took on a second wife. And you can read that in the Saints book. And I'm telling you that because I think it's important that if you don't know that you know that. A couple years ago, the church put out, I think it was about 5 years ago, the church put out these histories of Joseph Smith and the wives that he was sealed to. And the church has always been very transparent with Joseph Smith's life and what happened in the restoration process of restoring a church. There's never been any secrecy about that. But about 5 years ago, when, as I remember it, they did an exhibit downtown Salt Lake. Well, maybe it was more than 5 years ago. Anyway, so many of my friends, they saw this happen. They read about it. I wasn't living in Utah at the time, but I had gone back to see my parents and all of the news articles were about this. Joseph Smith's multiple wives, the things that Joseph Smith did. How can I belong to a church set up by a man who was so ungodly? Basically was the message. I think that actually was a headline. Joseph Smith was an ungodly man. That one stuck out in my brain. Anyway, so yeah, the articles were talking about, here's the truth about this man and you belong to his church. So I saw something really unfortunate happen. A lot of my friends walked away. My personal friends. I have had personal best friends that I've grown up with who have walked away from this church because of this specific time in history. One of my friends specifically, she dove deep into this history and found out this stuff with the bank, this stuff with I'm talking about Joseph Smith, the Kirtland Safety Society, taking on additional wives. And from outward appearances, yeah, that sounds like a really big scandal and a man who could be misusing church funds and church purposes. And this specific friend, we had several debates about it where she questioned my testimony. How can you follow a man like that? How can you be part of a church that was set up by that man? And my answer is the same then as it is now. I don't worship Joseph Smith. I believe he was a prophet called of God. As I said earlier, I believe that everything he did was ordained. He was ordained for that. I don't worship him. So this is why it's so significant that Section 115, amidst all of that chaos happening, amidst having 28 people excommunicated in Ohio and excommunicating his own first presidency, the Lord has a message for him then, and he has a message for us now. And it's Section 115, and I love it. It is verse 3. He says, "And also unto my faithful servants who are of the high council of my church in Zion, for thus it shall be called, and unto all the elders and people of my church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, scattered abroad in all the world. For thus shall my church be called in the last days, even the church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." So the Lord says it right there. Here's the name of my church. Why is that significant? Why does it matter? Up until this point, the church had called itself multiple different things. The Church of Christ, that's the one I read. It's said on that thing, you can look, but there's multiple different names that the church had called itself. But this is the first time that the Lord specifically said, this is the name of my church. Why that's significant is it makes it very crystal clear whose church this is. It is the church of Jesus Christ. And who belongs to it? The Latter-day Saints, the people who want to follow him. So I was so struck by this week after reading the history, because the reason this had to be known in that specific time in history for these people is to make it clear this is not the church of Joseph Smith. This is the church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is who we worship. This is who we follow. Now, the rest of that section is really good because it makes it just so clear that we follow Jesus Christ. That's how we stand on holy ground. And in following him, that's where safety is. And it talks about how if we build upon him, then that's where we want to be. And that also he tells them they want to build up far west speedily. So why that's interesting to me. Remember in November of 2018, and again in conference a couple weeks ago, October of 2021, when our modern day prophet, President Thomas, oh my goodness, that was back in time. President Russell M. Nelson, he was very clear about the name of the church, what the name of the church should be called. So that was his first, in 2018, he was still new in his role as a prophet, but he wanted to make it so clear. Here is the name of our church. We are not going by Mormons, which is a term given to us that doesn't explain who we worship or who we follow or who we are. We are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's where they call it the rebranding of the church came. We got rid of sites like Mormon.org. We changed the names to churchofjesuschrist.org. That's the one I shared with you earlier. We made it very clear in all of our messaging who we worship and who we are. And the contrast or comparison of doing that with the saints of 1838 and doing it with the saints of 2018 and 2021, it's astounding to me. I was just so amazed by that this week to see of all the things the Lord could tell those people then and now, of all the things he could say in a time when people are worried about money and land and health and how they're going to care for their family, which is happening in this moment. Of all the things the Lord decides to tell us through his living prophet is, this is the name of my church. This is it. So what I've been thinking a lot this week, and I'm going to invite you to think about it the same. What does knowing that God himself chose the name of our church mean to you? What does that mean? What does it mean to belong to a church where the name was specified by God? And what does it mean to belong to a church that belongs to Jesus Christ? The church of Jesus Christ, it's his church. And we are the Latter-day Saints in it. What does that mean to you? I've spent a lot of time thinking about it this week and thinking about just how loving and merciful God is to all of us, that he could have given them verses of comfort. He could have given them verses of chastisement. He could have given them verses of direction. But instead, what he said is, this is the name of my church. That should get rid of any other confusion. This is my church. And when I think about my friends that have left, I think about how that could have solved everything. If they would have understood that Joseph Smith was a man doing the best that a man could do, and I am a woman doing the best that a woman could do. And each one of you are a human in a human body doing the best that you can do. And yes, we're all going to make mistakes. That's why the atonement of Jesus Christ is so important. That's why repentance is so important. But if we get lost in the belief that we belong to the church of Russell M. Nelson, or that we belong to the church of Missy Beavers, and we put all of our faith in that human making the mistakes, that of course is when we leave, because our faith was in the wrong place. So I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know who I am. I'm a Latter-day Saint. I'm a child of God. I know God's plan. I follow him in faith. We're practicing that song for Bo's upcoming primary. Oh man, I'm blanking out. I'm recording this late in the day, by the way. I usually record in the morning. But anyway, we're practicing that for Bo's primary program. But I want you to think about that. The rest of these sections are phenomenal. They also cover tithing and why it's important to pay tithing. So those are the two things I wanted to share from this week. We're sitting in a moment in time that is identical to this set of scriptures. Why is it important to you to know what church we belong to, the name of the church, and then also to be tithed within that church, to give those tithing to God that he can use to build our church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I would love to hear your thoughts. You can share in the comments or think about it, pray about it. Ask yourself what that means to you. And if you have any doubt that arises from this section of history, I think that's normal. I really do. I think Satan loves this section of history because so many humans did so many human things. And I think he loves digging that up to show people as evidence. I say that because I've had well over a dozen friends leave the church over this section of history. And in every conversation I've had with those friends, they are not conversations filled with light. They're conversations that are dark. They're conversations that are angry and mean and fault finding. And it is a spirit of the devil that he loves pointing out human foibles. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the church that worships light and is light, does not glorify in human weakness. We take that weakness to God so that we can be made strong. And the beauty of that, and knowing that we belong to that church where humans are weak, at least makes me feel better, because I know that when I make mistakes, even in this very video, I've made mistakes, but it doesn't matter because I'm worshiping Jesus Christ. I'm not worshiping my ability to teach or, how great I am. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I am a child of God. I'm a Latter-day follower of Jesus Christ in his church. So things to think about. I just think it's incredible. I'm so grateful for my membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because it does tell me who I am and whose I am. And having that stability, I think that's the greatest gift in these really, really uncertain times, is to know who we belong to. And I want you to think about that, pray about that, spend some time pondering that. And journal whatever it is you learn about, because the Lord has been teaching me this week through asking those very questions. So I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.